You're 34 years old. You have $1.2 million in the bank. You quit your job on a Tuesday. You book a flight to Lisbon. You sit on a terrace, drink espresso, watch the trams roll by, and feel for the first time in your adult life, completely free. Now fast forward 18 months. You're back home. Not because you ran out of money. You didn't. But because something else ran out. Something nobody warned you about. Something the spreadsheets never track. That's what this video is about. Because the personal finance world has sold you a story. It's a clean story, a mathematical story, a deeply satisfying story. Work less, save more, hit a number, walk away. Freedom. And that story is not wrong exactly. It's just incomplete. And the part that's missing? It's the part that matters most. Here is a number that has quietly become the organizing principle of an entire generation's financial life. 25. Not 25 years old. The number 25 as a multiplier. Take your annual spending. Multiply it by 25. That's your financial freedom number. That's the amount of money sitting in investments that supposedly lets you live off your portfolio forever without ever working again. It's called the 4% rule. It came from a 1994 research paper by a financial planner named William Bengen. He looked at historical stock market returns, ran the numbers against 30-year retirement periods, and concluded that if you withdrew 4% of your portfolio per year, adjusted for inflation, you had an extremely high probability of never running out of money. The FIRE movement, that's financial independence, retire early, took this idea and ran with it, sprinted with it, built an entire identity around it. And by 2025, there are millions of people, mostly in their 20s and 30s, organizing their entire financial lives around this single formula. Some of them are right. Mathematically. Their portfolios will survive, their withdrawal rates will hold, and some of them are going to discover, a decade in, that the math was never actually the problem. How the system works. Let's slow down and build this from scratch. You earn money. You spend less than you earn. You invest the difference. You do this consistently for years, sometimes decades. The investment grows, partly because you keep adding to it, and partly because of compound returns, which is just the phenomenon of your gains generating their own gains. Money, making money, making money. The faster you save, meaning the higher the percentage of your income you set aside, the faster you reach the number. If you save 10% of your income, the math says it takes roughly 43 years to retire. If you save 25%, about 32 years. If you save 50%, around 17 years. If you save 75%, you can potentially retire in 7 years. These numbers assume average market returns. They assume your spending stays roughly constant. They assume you invest in something like a broad index fund, a basket that tracks the whole market, rather than trying to pick individual stocks, which statistically almost no one does profitably over the long run. It is a genuinely elegant system. There is real math underneath it. People have made it work. This is not a scam. But the uncomfortable math. Let's talk about 3 things that the 4% rule does not fully account for. The first one is sequence of returns risk. This sounds technical. It's actually terrifying once you understand it. Imagine you retire at 40 with $1 million. The market historically returns about 7% per year after inflation. You withdraw 4%. That's $40,000 per year to live on. The math says this works for 30+ years. Fine. But what if the market crashes in year 1? Or year 2? Or year 3? You're withdrawing $40,000 from a portfolio that just lost 30% of its value. You're not just pulling from gains anymore. You're eating into the principal. You're selling shares at the worst possible time, because you have to. And now those shares aren't there to participate in the recovery. The math still works, on average. But on average hides the path. And the path is where real lives unfold. The person who retires in 1999 1 year before the dot-com crash, faces a dramatically different reality than someone who retires in 2009, right after the crash is over. Same number, same formula, wildly different outcomes. The second issue is healthcare. In countries without universal coverage, this can single-handedly break a financial independence plan. A serious illness in your 40s before you qualify for government programs can cost tens of thousands of dollars per year. That expense does not appear in the spreadsheet you built at 28. The third issue is inflation. Not headline inflation, lifestyle inflation. The subtle, creeping tendency of your spending to increase as you age, as your tastes change, as your circumstances shift. Children, parents who need help, a city that got more expensive, a hobby that got more serious. The 4% rule assumes your spending is fixed. Human beings are not fixed. But here is where the script really changes. Here is the cost that doesn't show up in any financial model. The one that brought that person back from Lisbon. Identity. For most people, not all people, but most, work is not just a paycheck. It is a source of structure, a source of status, a source of belonging, a reason to get up on a Tuesday morning and have somewhere to be and something to prove. The FIRE community has a phrase for the feeling that hits people after they quit. One more year syndrome. The anxiety that keeps you working past your number because you're not psychologically ready to stop. But there's a less discussed version that happens after you actually do stop. It's called the retirement identity crisis. And it is remarkably common. Study after study from occupational psychology shows that abrupt, unplanned exit from a career, even a voluntary one, is correlated with increased rates of depression, anxiety, loss of purpose, and a measurable decline in cognitive engagement. The people for whom early retirement tends to work well share something in common. They don't retire from something. They retire to something. They have a project, a community, a mission that fills the structural vacuum left by work. The people for whom it goes sideways. They thought freedom meant absence. Absence of a boss. Absence of deadlines. Absence of obligation. What they found instead was absence of meaning. And you cannot index fund your way out of that. Now let's be honest about who the FIRE movement was designed for. And who it quietly excludes. The canonical FIRE story goes roughly like this. Mid-20s software engineer in Seattle or San Francisco. 6-figure salary. Aggressive savings rate. Markets perform well. Retires at 38. Blogs about it. This is a real story. For a specific subset of people in a specific income bracket in a specific decade of market performance, this is completely achievable. But the median American household income is around $75,000. After taxes and basic living expenses, the savings rate required to hit FIRE in 10-15 years is, for most of those households, not mathematically possible. You cannot save 50% of $75,000 and also pay rent in any major city, raise children, handle emergencies, and maintain any semblance of a normal life. The FIRE movement, at its most evangelical, has a marketing problem. It presents as a universal truth what is, in practice, a premium product, available mostly to people who already had significant advantages, high income, no medical debt, no family obligations to carry, no structural gaps in the system working against them. That's not an argument against the ideas. The ideas are good. Save aggressively. Spend intentionally. Let compound returns do the heavy lifting. These are genuinely useful principles. But presenting it as the obvious solution to the problem of money, while standing at the top of an income distribution, requires a degree of epistemic honesty that the genre does not always supply. Here is what's actually happening, at scale, when you look at this from above. A generation of people looked at the existing arrangement, work until 65, receive a pension that barely covers basic expenses, spend your healthiest decades in cubicles for companies that will lay you off the moment it's convenient, and said no thank you. We are going to find a different way. That instinct is correct. That instinct is healthy. That instinct is, arguably, long overdue. The financial system was never designed around individual flourishing. It was designed around aggregate productivity. Your participation in it is a means to an end. And more people are recognizing that. But the solution cannot be purely financial. It cannot be a number on a spreadsheet. Because the question underneath how do I get free, is not a math question. It's a philosophical one. What is work for? What is time for? What does a good life actually look like? And crucially, who gets to ask those questions? And who is too busy surviving to ask them at all? The FIRE movement, at its best, is a prompt for those questions. A forcing function. A way of interrogating the default assumptions baked into modern economic life. At its worst, it's a formula that mistakes financial independence for personal liberation. And those are not the same thing. So let's return to the person on the terrace in Lisbon. They came back. Not broke. Not defeated. But different. Recalibrated. They didn't go back to the old job. They built something smaller. Slower. Something that generated enough money to matter but not enough to dominate. They traded maximum optimization for something harder to quantify. They called it enough, which turns out to be the number nobody talks about. Not 25 times your expenses, not a specific portfolio balance, not a withdrawal rate with a historical success probability. Just enough. Enough to not be afraid. Enough to have choices. Enough to stop running the optimization function every waking hour of your life. The hidden cost of financial freedom is the discovery that freedom itself has to be built, not bought. You cannot purchase your way into a meaningful life. You can only create the conditions in which one might be possible. And that work? That particular kind of work? There is no retirement from it.